Hello, everyone. It's Royce here, and I want to welcome you all to the Royce in the House YouTube channel. Uh, Please come to the channel, check us out. If you like what you see, go ahead and subscribe and hit that notification bell so you'll know when the next show is coming on. Thanks so much. Okay, this show is going to be about Bob Dylan and Willie Nelson and the Teatro Theater. It's called Tales from Oxnard'S Teatro Theater, shooting pool with Bob Dylan, and buying weed for Willie Nelson. Okay. The historic Teatro Theater has given life to music by many musicians, okay, including Neil Young, Iggy Pop, Emmylou Harris, the Red Hot Chili Peppers, and many others. Willie Nelson loved the Teatro so much that he named his 45th studio album after it. The album was released September 98 by Island Records, and afterwards a documentary was released showing the recording sessions and live performances. Okay, so how did it all get started? All right, back in the 1990s, Pacific Coast Highway, which runs up and down the California coast, actually ran through downtown Oxnard Boulevard, okay? If it hadn't, a few landmark rock and country folk albums wouldn't sound the way they did. And Oxnard would have missed out on a connection to music history, okay? Bob Dylan wouldn't have shot pool with the locals, and Willie Nelson wouldn't have sent friends to Ventura to score high-grade weed for him. So how did it all come about? Okay, in 1995, Mark Howard, a recording engineer who worked frequently with producer Daniel Lanyos, was on a road trip from a meeting in LA to his home in San Francisco. On his way through downtown Oxnard, he passed an old movie theater with Teatro on the marquee and a for lease sign in the window. Okay, the owner of the Teatro was hoping the space could be used as a recording studio or for live performances or both. Okay, he thought it would make a good recording studio. Howard and Lanyos liked to record in places that weren't built for recording music. Lanyos's recording of U2's The Joshua Tree, was recorded in an 18th century Irish mansion. And in 1989, Howard recorded Dylan's Oh Mercy in an old Victorian house in New Orleans. So they like that kind of stuff. Okay, Howard says, I'm very much a guerrilla recordist, and recordings in studios just doesn't lend itself that very well, according to Howard. You're in a glass booth, you're separated from the artists, you're on the clock, and I don't know how that even became the standard because it's kind of uncomfortable and awkward, right? Howard, a recording engineer and producer who helped run the Teatro studio in downtown Oxnard from 1995 to 2000, just that 5 years. Howard had a good feeling about the Teatro because old movie theaters always sound great, all right? The size of the room, the high ceilings really matter for the way I record, he said. I checked with Lanyos, called the building's owner, and they soon rented the place for $1,500 a month, okay? Howard and Lanyos worked at the Teatro for about 5 years, as I mentioned earlier, but they recorded 2 albums that are still regarded as late career high marks by legendary artists, Dylan's Grammy Award-winning Time Out of Mind and Nelson's Teatro, that had a photo of the theater as its cover art. That's pretty cool, okay? Both albums have a legacy. Island Records reissued Teatro on vinyl this year to mark its 25th anniversary. Also this year, Columbia released a 60-song set called Fragments, the Time Out of Mind Sessions, the 17th in the label's bootleg series of Dylan rarities, remasters, and live recordings. Wow, this is getting pretty heavy if you ask me. The Teatro is now owned by Paul Sangster, a businessman based in Chatsworth, California. His company, Future Lighting, does projections, video, and visual effects for television and concerts and other live venues. For example, the visuals at the Hollywood Bowl concerts. Sangster has been fixing up the inside of the theater, and he recently put the building up for lease. He said he's hoping it can become a recording studio again, or a concert venue, or anything else that could be a catalyst for revitalization of downtown Oxnard, okay? Okay, so let's talk a little bit about the early history of the Teatro Theater in Oxnard. The Teatro Theater originally opened in 1929 as the Boulevard Theater. It was the first talkie movie theater in Ventura County, with ads that boasted, "Our screen talks and sings like live people." That's a hell of a marketing plan. The population of Oxnard and the movie theater business both changed a great deal in the next few decades. By the late 1950s, it switched to a Spanish language movie theater and eventually changed the name to Teatro. Okay, a few more interesting facts. At some point, it showed some fairly racy Spanish language films, judging by the poster Howard found in the back in the 1990s, but there was no evidence it was ever an adult theater, okay? The theater had been closed for years by the time Howard found it in 1995. It was, he said, a dump, with a moldy popcorn machine still in the lobby and a homeless man sleeping in the ticket booth. I think that's great. Homeless man sleeping in the ticket booth. Howard relocated the ticket booth resident to a broken Cadillac Eldorado in the parking lot and had heavy gates put up outside the entrance. Then he moved his recording equipment in and turned the place into one of his guerrilla studios, okay? All right, so decorating consisted of, the seats were torn out. The old Mexican movie posters actually went back up on the walls. Not sure what that was all about. A little nostalgia, I guess. A pool table went into one of the adjacent rooms to the lobby. Lighting was warm and low, and the floors were covered with Persian rugs. Okay. Okay, shooting pool with Bob Dylan. Okay, the first thing Howard and Lanios recorded at the Teatro was music for the 1996 Billy Bob Thornton movie, Sling Blade. What a great movie that was. Then in 1997, Dylan reached out about recording another album with Lanios. He had already written some songs, and he started driving to Oxnard from his home in Malibu, California, to record them at the Teatro. All right, we're getting into it now. Dylan came by himself every day in a pickup truck. Howard said he would walk around the neighborhood, go to Gordon's Western Wear or the pool hall. I told him, don't go to the pool hall. And what does he do? He goes straight to the pool hall. He had a cowboy hat on and nobody recognized him. That was a big part of the Teatro's charm. Even Willie Nelson, professor of one of America's most famous faces, was never recognized at the taqueria across the street from the Teatro, okay? The location was great for superstars, Howard said. There's nobody there, no one to bother them. It's the first time in their lives they don't walk down the street and need security. It's total freedom for them. Okay, so Mark Howard was the recording engineer on Time Out of Mind and other albums recorded at the Teatro. On his drive to Oxnard, Dylan would pick up a radio station, played old blues songs. Don't we all love the blues? And he told Howard and Lanios he wanted it. He wanted the sound. That was the sound he wanted for his album, kind of bluesy. Time Out of Mind was recorded with 10 or 15 musicians in the room together. Howard said it sounded like a rough, raw live performance. Dylan would change the key on every single take, and people are making a lot of mistakes. And it sounds very junky. It was live, and a lot of shit was bleeding into the vocal mic. Howard said he prefers the more polished sound of Oh Mercy. But Time Out of Mind was a hit, Dylan's first million-selling album since the 70s. It would win Album of the Year at the 1998 Grammy Awards and is widely credited with kind of a relaunching of a late career, a renaissance that continues to this very day. So that's a pretty important statement there. The album was almost never released. After recording for a while at the Teatro, Dylan decided there was too many distractions working that close to home, and the whole gang relocated to Criteria Studios in Miami, Florida. Howard said the sound in that studio was never quite right, and worse, Lanios and Dylan started fighting and weren't even on speaking terms. Okay, we'd be sitting around a console listening to a track. Dan would lean over to me and say, "That sounds great." And Bob would say, "Is there somebody talking, Howard?" I mean, that's how on the outs they were with one another. After Miami, Howard gave Dylan a cassette tape of the rough mixes. Months went by, and it seemed like the project might be completely abandoned when Howard got a call from Dylan. Dylan had been playing the tape at a friend's house in Santa Monica when there was a knock on the door, and it was a downstairs neighbor who said, "What are you guys listening to? I've got to get that record." That review all by itself was enough to prompt Dylan to come back to Oxnard and finish mixing the album, Howard said. For Dylan fans, Time Out of Mind is his death record, okay? I'll explain that. The first line of the song is, "I'm walking through the streets that are dead." And then there are songs called "Not Dark Yet" and "I'm Trying to Get to Heaven." The mortality vibe of that album is tied to a health scare Dylan went through after the album was recorded and before it was released. While touring in Europe in May 97, he was hospitalized with chest pains, and it turned out to be a treatable but potentially fatal heart condition triggered by a bacterial infection. Dylan, then 56, was quoted as saying, "I really thought I'd be seeing Elvis soon." Okay, so buying weed for Willie, okay? But it was Nelson's Teatro that put the studio on the map. Howard had taken a photo of the front of the building and wrote Willie Nelson on the marquee, and he gave it to Nelson's manager to use as an album cover. And that, in fact, is the album cover of Teatro. They loved it so much they called the record Teatro, Howard said. Nelson parked his tour bus in the Teatro parking lot and slept there while his wife and children stayed at the hotel on the beach. He brought his sister Bobby to play piano, and his harmonica player Mickey Raphael, and the rest of the band was hired for a session. In 2 days, they recorded 21 songs in 2 days, 14 of which ended up on the album. As soon as the bus arrived, Nelson's manager came to Howard and said, "Willie's out of weed. Can you get him some weed?" Howard was living in Ventura at the time, and he knew a guy. When he found the guy, he told him the purchase was for Willie Nelson. The dealer said, "Oh, no, this is dirt weed. You can't give it to Willie Nelson. But the guy upstairs has really good stuff," Howard said. "It's grown in bat guana, and it's really high in THC." Okay, we all need to remember that, bat guana. Okay. So Howard went upstairs and paid $800 for an ounce of the bat guana stuff. He brought it to Nelson's bus around 10 a.m. the next morning. "I said, Willie, I've got the weed, but it's really strong. Maybe don't smoke it during the session. Smoke something else and smoke this at night," Howard said. Willie said, "Fuck that," and rolled one up. Okay. The Teatro, the album, has a Latin sound which borrowed attributes where it was recorded. Okay, the recording crew spent a whole lot of time across the street at Cielito's Lindo Cafe, where they were blown away by their jukebox, Howard said. Okay, so Nelson's guitar tech staggered into the studio a little later and had some trouble locating a cable that was right in front of him. I wonder why. Howard said Nelson was completely unfazed, stoned out of his mind, but completely unfazed. He sat down and recorded 12 songs. Oh, you got to love Willie. Lanyos and Howard are both from Canada, and they had no background in Latin music. They tried to bring a local mariachi band in off the street to record with Dylan, but Howard said they were too raw to put on the album. Okay, is what he said. For the Teatro record, they used 2 drummers, which gave it a rhythmic sound unlike anything else in Nelson's catalog. Teatro is almost a full duet album with Emmylou Harris singing on 10 of the 14 songs. That was a bit of a surprise, but they all kind of lived in the area. "I thought it was an amazing thing because she didn't know the songs," Howard said. "She was kind of singing off the cuff and had no video prompter or lyrics, so she shadowed him, singing slightly behind him. It was beautiful the way she did it." Okay, so after Teatro, The Secret of Teatro Theater was out. The Red Hot Chili Peppers recorded there in preparation for their 1999 album Californication. I absolutely love that album and that song in particular. but none of Teatro's recordings ended up on the album, unfortunately. The band decided to go with Rick Rubin to produce the album, and he re-recorded the songs in a different studio. That's kind of sad. Okay, by 2000, the partnership between Lanyos and Howard had run its course, and they moved into separate recording studios, okay? Howard said he'd love to see the Teatro as a studio again or a concert venue, but it can be difficult to draw people from out of the area to downtown Oxnard. Downtown Oxnard has changed since the 1990s. One constant has been repeated efforts by civic business leaders to revitalize it, to attract more people for jobs in the daytime and restaurants, music, and culture at night. I really love historic downtown, said Sangster, the new Teatro's owner. There's a lot of history here, and I think it could be something great for Oxnard. Yeah, I'm not too far from Oxnard. I'm maybe 2 hours and 15 minutes. I've been there many times. It's really coming back now. Paul Sangster, owner of the Teatro, hopes to reopen the studio. The space is a studio or concert venue once again. Sangster said he's looking into funding some improvements to the building through the Mills Act, which already added air conditioning in 2015. When Neil Young came to record the Monsanto Years, the neon sign in front was damaged in a recent storm and could be replaced. And Sangster also wants to add solar panels and electrical vehicle chargers. These are things in that area, said Abel Magana, the executive director of Downtown Oxnard's Improvement Center Association, rather. We'd like to see all that building active as a venue for the public. Okay. Nelson turned 90 later this year. Les actually turned 90 already. And he's told interviewers he's quit smoking and he switched to edibles. Smart man. And other cannabis delivery methods. If he ever comes back to Teatro, there are one thing he might notice from downtown Oxnard. There's now a legal dispensary about a mile away. Okay, and that is my Tales from Oxnard with Bob Dylan and Willie Nelson. As I asked before, please visit the channel. If you like what you see, go ahead and subscribe to us. We're having a great time. And I will leave you with this. How many roads must a man walk down? And to all the girls I've known before, might I say I've shagged some. Anyway, enough of all that. Thank you all so much for watching. We will have our live podcast Sunday night. We always have a live podcast, 6:30 p.m. every Sunday night at Royce in the House. Thank you all so much, and we appreciate you watching. And that's what's going on at Royce's World today. Thank you all so much.